about limits. Now, when it comes to limits, what kind of limits are we talking about here? This is an AI analytics conference, so limits related to predictive analytics, and especially from the commercial side being anything that has to do with customers, with physicians, with personally identifiable information, and the limits coming from different regulations we have, like GDPR, SGB, which is German specific regulation, as well as any other. What I'll start with is explaining why it matters, share a use case to share the data challenges we have faced, driven by these regulations, which come with many shades of gray, and at the end, share with you what has worked. Before I continue, quick introductions. Jack Lampka is my name. I'm head of data at MSD Germany. MSD Germany being a marketing and sales organization. So lots of the work we do, actually majority of the work we do, has to do with customers, so with personally identifiable information. 4 is the number of years I've spent in pharma and MSD, and prior 21 years I spent in tech, all these 25 years along the data analytics value chain, so that include data governance, data preparation, analytics, data science, and data visualization. I currently work for MSD, which is a pharma company focusing on prescription medication in the areas of oncology, diabetes, and vaccines. And we are a $42 billion revenue business. And because this is an international conference, so MSD, the name, we use this name in most of the countries aside from the US and Canada. In the US and Canada, we are known as Merck. So that's so much about me and the company. Before I continue, I need to disclaim that I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a data privacy expert, and I'm neither a compliance officer. I'm just a soul whose intentions are good, or data privacy legal. Please don't let me be misunderstood. But seriously, don't treat what I share with you as a legal data privacy advice. Again, I'm looking at this perspective from the analytics side, and I share with you how we have engaged with lawyers, legal colleagues, and data privacy colleagues on addressing these challenges. So let's go into why it matters. Why it matters that we would like to use personally identifiable information. McKinsey has done a nice analysis. It's kind of old, 6 years old, but still, roughly speaking, is true, particularly the relative numbers, maybe absolute numbers have changed. What they've analyzed is what is the potential annual value that AI and analytics can deliver across industries. You see many industries represented here. You see pharma and medical products at the very end. Although $441 billion, it's still a substantial benefit that could be delivered annually through AI and analytics. McKinsey went even further down, that a few clicks down, how this translates into specific functions first. So this $441 billion opportunity for pharma is translated into, or can be found, generated through marketing sales, which is almost half, and then supply chain, product development, strategy, service operations, etc. So marketing sales is basically the core business I'm part of, and McKinsey went even farther down. So this 219 billion can be generated through marketing budget allocation, optimized, obviously marketing budget allocation, through optimized customer acquisition, better channel management, churn reduction, and next product to buy. At least 3 areas out of that have to do with personally identifiable information. So basically, knowing your customer, knowing your physician. And this is basically what we have done. And we're doing this on a regular basis. Let me then go to the use case to explain what we plan to do, how we did this, and the data challenges we have faced and how we address them. So our business colleagues wanted to know who are my most relevant customers. They wanted to know how networked they are. What are their preferred communication channels? What are their content preferences? So they wanted to have a customer profile. And we defined this customer profile by identifying different scores. So a score describing how willing a physician is to see a pharma rep, how willing he or she is to be contacted by phone or engaged through email, how interested is she in attending events, how present is the physician online, either through her own website or through patient portals, for example. We looked at how networked the physician is, how much influencing potential she has on her colleagues. We wanted to know how inclined she would be to prescribe newly introduced medication. And then we wanted to know prescription potential. So there were several components we looked at, several scores we wanted to develop. And obviously, we need data to do that. We started, or you can start with locally available data. You can look at your CRM system and identify all the interactions that have been recorded between the company and the physician. Many of these scores, however, require additional data. So we look at additional external data sources. We look at acquiring data, we looked at scraping data, potential partnerships with data providers. So at the end, we have 3 main buckets of data. We have internal data coming from our CRM, which is basically the activities between us and the physician. We have purchase data, demographics, or prescription models. And we also look at publicly available data and scraping from PubMed or patient portals or physician websites. So at the end, we have analyzed 200,000 physicians. And this is, again, for MSD Germany. We have used 9 data sources, 3 internal, 6 external. We have evaluated 100 variables and used at the end 60 to define several scores. So, as you can probably imagine, 9 data sources, particularly internal, external, there could be some challenges. Yes, and we have faced several challenges. Let's start with the ones that are pretty obvious and true for any industry. So it's data accuracy, consistency, integrity, particularly if you want to combine external and internal data. So we call that data quality and availability challenges. Then we had challenges with the regulations or limitations driven by the regulations, whether it's GDPR, copyright laws, and any other regulations. So anything related to legal, data privacy, and compliance. And finally, some challenges that were not obvious from the start, but challenges with data mindset or self-imposed restrictions that basically is a data literacy challenge. Just one example, as a side note, we have a CRM system that can be used to send email, where the sales rep can send through that CRM system email to the physician. And if that happens, we get information about opens, clicks, the time of the day when it was opened, the fragment of the email that was clicked. However, if the sales rep sends an email through Outlook, at best case, we know when that email was sent because it has to be recorded manually in our CRM system, but that's it. So data mindset requires also everybody in the organization to understand how data is being generated so we can have better insights about our engagement with our customers. So these are the challenges. The solutions for data quality and availability is establishing clear data ownership and governance. For the data literacy, we found launching a data evangelism program will help improve that data mindset. But today I will focus on the middle part, how to address the legal data privacy and compliance challenges. And the first recommendation, I'll come to more at the end, is involve your lawyer and your data privacy officer from the start. So the challenges when it comes to regulations have many shades of gray. I learned that along the way that not every regulation is as black and white, particularly new regulations like GDPR. And let me go into that in more detail. But first, from German perspective, some of this, although it's applicable to other European markets at least, there are three main legal limitations when it comes to using personally identifiable information in pharma. First, GDPR. Again, this is true for every company operating in Europe across any industry. So GDPR requires proactive information. We have to inform customers how we handle their data. Customers have the right to access. They can call us anytime and request what information we have stored about them. They have the right to be forgotten. They can request anytime the data to be erased. GDPR comes with this principle of data minimization. So that applies to volume of the data as well as a time dimensions where after some time data needs to be removed. And in Germany, probably the biggest change with GDPR, since Germany had already strong data privacy laws, the biggest change is the penalty that can be imposed if the company doesn't comply with the GDPR regulations, a penalty of up to 4% of annual revenues, global annual revenues. However, and this is where the limitations become potentially less clear or maybe not as strict as they may seem, there is this legitimate interest provision in GDPR. If you can prove that you have legitimate business reasons to use the data, you are legally allowed to do this. So GDPR. The second one are anti-corruption laws, like including Criminal Code and Administrative Offences Act. It's a criminal offense for a person to offer, pay, and accept bribes. And when it comes to physicians, we are not allowed to discriminate and treat physicians differently based on their economic potential. That's pretty obvious. So there's nothing it's relevant, so to speak, for what we do, because that's outside of relevancy, how relevant that is for analytics. But the third one is something that is relevant for us being the analytics function, which is the Sozialgesetzbuch, and particularly this SGB book number 5, paragraph 305A. Probably everybody in the pharma space knows that. The Social Code for Statutory Health Insurance. It prohibits us or any third party from acquiring physician-specific prescription data. We are able or allowed, however, to acquire territory-level data, so aggregated prescription data, although the territory needs to meet the requirements of at least 300,000 residents or 1,300 physicians. So these are the limitations we are facing. Now, how to address them? Well, many shades of gray is a topic that I'll go into in a second, where sometimes these regulations are not necessarily black and white. And another thing that I have learned also with through engagement with our colleagues in legal, the spirit of the law matters. And how we address that, let me go into this next. So many shades of gray. GDPR, and actually, as I understand it, again, I'm not a lawyer, but as I understand it, every law identifies few things that are clearly illegal and few things that are clearly legal. But there is something in between. There's these many shades of gray, which are sometimes unclear and only get clarity when somebody sues somebody. So when they are decided by the court. If you look at companies in many industries like tech, telecom, utilities, travel, they operate in this gray area and sometimes very, very close to the illegal side, still within the gray area, which has not been at that point in time decided. They basically take calculated risk. They know there is a risk addressing or dealing with this data, personally identifiable information that potentially may be illegal, but it's not being defined as illegal yet. They take the calculated risk because they believe there is an upside potential. The benefit is higher than the risk. Now, taking an analogy from the time when years ago when we did a lot of business travel, if you've never missed a flight, you are spending too much time at airports. So these companies, again, taking calculated risk and potentially missing a flight, or in their case, potentially being fined a penalty. Now, where's Pharma? Based on my experience, Pharma clearly operates within the legal space. Doesn't even, if not forced or if not convinced, doesn't want to move to the gray area, even the light gray area. And why is that? Well, there are the internal ethics. There's this red face test where pharma companies believe actually it's true probably for every company, but in particular for pharma, they don't want to see something negative in the next morning's newspaper or online publication. Because they are scrutinized by the government, there is more scrutiny for pharma industry than many other industries. And pharma companies are interested in a positive public perception. So that's the reason why pharma companies hesitate to leave that clearly defined legal space. Our job as analysts is to push them a little bit, push our colleagues, bring our colleagues along to the light gray area. Now I'll share with you how we've done it, but let me share this concept of spirit of the law. So HGB, this regulation that basically doesn't allow us to acquire physician-specific prescription data. But does that apply to modeling of physician-specific prescription data? Actually, that led to this idea that that it is associated or should be evaluated by legal expert every time. What is the spirit of the law? And the way we approached that challenge with our legal colleagues was clearly defined. Modeling doesn't equal real data. As part of the discussions, we kind of also learned potentially accuracy of our models will determine whether we should evaluate the spirit of the law. So potentially, if our accuracy of these models is 100%, we can exactly predict the physician-specific prescription data. We potentially may be touching on the spirit of the law, but our models are never 100% accurate. So none of our machine learning models is. So that's how we address this approach, or how we address or use the solution to find a way that we can still model data that we're not allowed to acquire. And along the way, we actually also learned that precedents matter. So if a law has been in place for a while, and if precedents have already been addressed through court decisions, or have been used, something has been used for a while and has not been even challenged in court, that's on our side. So in this case, many companies sell models of physician-specific prescription data. So any pharma company can buy that with physicians assigned to groups A, B, C, A, top prescriber, B, middle, and C, low prescriber. So there is a precedent, has been there for a while, and this is where these third parties offering models like that led us to the belief and strong support from legal. Yes, we can do that internally as well.
Can we have a question? Sorry to interrupt you. Can we have a question about what you were presenting so far?
Yeah.
One question from Irena from Spain. What do you think of federated learning solutions to address this problem of accessing data? If you can click the chat area, probably you can see it from.
Yeah, it's one of the. I will not go into that here in detail, but that's one of the next ideas we're exploring. Because yes, we don't care about the data itself. We want the insight that resides within the data. So we're exploring some partnerships in the ideation phase so far to basically use differential privacy, federate machine learning, where we can engage with partners who have the data, where we can actually tap on the insights without actually seeing the data. So I'll come to maybe a few more questions in a second. I would like to finish here with my recommendation, what has worked. So yes, there are limits, but potentially the perception of those is slightly different than the reality, because once you involve your legal and data privacy colleagues and compliance from the start, you can find solutions. They need to understand what you're planning to do. Just keep in mind the job of legal and data privacy is to minimize risk. And to minimize risk when you're dealing with data is to not use any data at all. Of course, that not using data will not help you to become a data-driven company. So there needs to be a balance. It needs to be trade-off. And that's why it helps to describe the benefits. What's the business benefit? What's the business case for using personally identifiable information? And then let's identify what potential risk there is. And ideally, if the benefits outweighs the risk, I need to see how that looks in my camera. If the benefits outweighs the risk, you probably should go for it. And this helps, as I mentioned before, look what somebody else has done in the past. If there are precedents of something doing with some data which potentially could be risky, but has been done for a long time and either challenged in court and approved to being legal, or not challenged at all because it's pretty obvious that it's possible, then that's your benefit. And that leads to sharing examples of predictive analytics from other companies and industries. So We always bring in the discussions with legal and data privacy, what more advanced companies like the Amazons, the Netflix are doing with personally identifiable information. We don't necessarily plan to be the Amazons or the Netflix, but we want to share what's possible to do with data, knowing also that these companies operate under the same GDPR regulations as we. So if what they do has not been challenged in court, potentially it's safe to do at the pharma company as well. And it helps also then to have some exchanges across pharma companies. Our legal and data privacy in particular have regular exchange sessions with other pharma companies where they can see what's being done here, what's being done there. Sometimes there are differences, and they can learn how other companies operate and help us also to implement something that potentially so far or until then has been considered illegal. Last but not least, if none of these work, you should escalate. I mean, if your executive team wants to become data-driven and insists that we should use more data to drive business decisions, and we have a legal department that is against using data, there should be, at the end, if you cannot address that to the first 5 points,